June 15, 1944. Saipan, Mariana Islands. Private First Class Takeshi Yamamoto presses his face against volcanic rock as the earth erupts around him. The roar of naval artillery drowns out his own breathing. Shrapnel hisses through the air like angry hornets, and somewhere behind him he hears Corporal Ito screaming, a sound that cuts through even the thunder of the American bombardment. Yamamoto is 19 years old. He's been on Saipan for 8 months, digging into limestone caves, fortifying positions that his officers swore were impregnable. They told him the Americans were demons, kichikubei, beasts who tortured prisoners, who mutilated the dead, who showed no mercy. Better to die than surrender. The small grenade tucked in his belt isn't for throwing at the enemy. It's for himself. The barrage lifts. For a heartbeat, silence hangs over the shattered landscape. Then comes the shout, "Move out!" But it's in English, not Japanese. Yamamoto risks a glance over the rocks and sees them. United States Marines, advancing in tactical bounds, their uniforms still somehow khaki clean, despite the carnage. Behind them, combat engineers with flamethrowers. His stomach twists. The defensive line collapses in minutes. Lieutenant Suzuki, who commanded their platoon with samurai pride, detonates a grenade beneath a Marine tank and disappears in a flash of red mist. Sergeant Tanaka charges with his bayonet and is cut down by rifle fire before he covers 10 meters. Yamamoto watches his entire unit disintegrate. He runs, not forward into glorious death, but backward, into the jungle interior. He abandons his rifle when it becomes too heavy. He tears off his uniform tunic when it snags on vines. Shame burns hotter than the tropical sun, but terror is stronger. He runs until his lungs are raw, until his legs give out, until he collapses beside a bomb crater filled with stagnant water. That's where the fever finds him. By nightfall, Yamamoto is delirious. The shrapnel wound in his thigh, barely noticeable during the retreat, has swollen into something monstrous. Red streaks crawl up his leg like poison vines. He drifts in and out of consciousness, plagued by visions of his mother's face, his village shrine, the disappointed eyes of his ancestors. He doesn't hear the American patrol until a boot crunches on leaves 5 feet away. Yamamoto's hand fumbles for the grenade. His fingers close around it. This is the moment his training prepared him for, the honorable death that will redeem his cowardice. He pulls the pin with trembling fingers. "Corpsmen?" The shout freezes him. A Marine drops to one knee, rifle trained on Yamamoto's chest, but he's not firing. He's calling for someone else. Within seconds, another American appears, younger than the Marine, unarmed except for a canvas bag marked with a red cross. Naval Pharmacist's Mate 3rd Class James Sullivan from Brooklyn, though Yamamoto doesn't know that yet. What Yamamoto does know, what his propaganda training burned into his brain, is that medics are legitimate targets. The Americans are barbaric. They will torture him. They will... Sullivan kneels beside him and gently removes the grenade from his hand. "Easy, buddy," Sullivan says, in a tone Yamamoto doesn't understand but somehow recognizes. "You're hurt bad. Let me help." Yamamoto tries to resist as Sullivan cuts away his trouser leg, but he's too weak. The American medic works with practiced efficiency, swabbing the wound, sprinkling sulfa powder, preparing a syringe of morphine. Yamamoto's mind reels. This is wrong. This is impossible. The medic should be killing him, not caring for him. Jesus, this one's cooked. Infection's deep. He needs the aid station now." "What about Davis?" the American Marine asks, gesturing back toward the trail where another voice is groaning. "He took one in the shoulder." Yamamoto understands enough English to catch the meaning. There's a wounded American soldier. A wounded American. And they're wasting time on him, on the enemy. His propaganda training says this is a trick, a deception before the torture begins. But Sullivan is already injecting the morphine. The drug hits Yamamoto's bloodstream like warm honey, and the world softens at the edges. He watches, barely conscious, as Sullivan applies a pressure dressing and signals for stretcher bearers. "Get this one back first. Priority 1. "Before Davis?" The American Marine sounds incredulous. "Look at him. Septic shock. Maybe 6 hours if we're lucky. Davis is stable." Sullivan's voice carries absolute authority. "Triage isn't about who's on our side. It's about who's going to die first." 2 Marines lift Yamamoto onto a canvas stretcher. As they carry him toward the American lines, he catches glimpses of the battlefield he just fled, a landscape transformed into an industrial killing ground. Destroyed bunkers, burning equipment, bodies in both uniforms. And everywhere, American medics moving among the wounded, treating them with the same mechanical efficiency, regardless of what flag they fought under. It doesn't make sense. None of it makes sense. His last clear thought before the morphine drags him under is a question that will haunt him for the rest of his life. What if everything they told us was a lie?
June 16th, 1944. 2nd Marine Division Field Hospital, Saipan. Yamamoto wakes to whiteness, not the blinding white of death he expected, but the sterile white of canvas stretched over metal frames, a field hospital tent. He can hear the generators humming, smell the sharp tang of antiseptic mixed with blood and sweat. For a confused moment, he thinks he's back in Japanese medical facilities at the rear, but then he hears English, rapid-fire medical jargon punctuated by the clatter of surgical instruments. His leg throbs with a dull, distant ache. When he tries to move, he discovers his wrists are secured to the cot frame with leather restraints, not tight enough to hurt, but firm enough to prevent escape. A rational precaution, he realizes. He's still the enemy. "Hey, Sleeping Beauty's awake." Yamamoto turns his head to see Sullivan checking an IV bag suspended above his cot. The medic looks exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, blood spatters on his dungarees, but he manages a crooked smile. Behind him, the tent is organized chaos. 30 cots arranged in rows, medical personnel moving between them with purposeful urgency. Yamamoto counts at least 8 other Japanese wounded among the American casualties. "Fever broke around 0300, Sullivan says, scribbling notes on a clipboard. "You're a lucky son of a gun. Another few hours and you'd have lost that leg, maybe your life." Yamamoto doesn't respond. He's watching a drama unfold 3 cots down. An American surgeon working on a Japanese soldier, while a wounded Marine waits on an adjacent bed, conscious and clearly in pain. The Marine sees Yamamoto looking and offers a weary thumbs up. "Doc's good," the Marine says, his voice tight with controlled agony. "Got shrap in my back, but your boy there's got it worse. Collapsed lung. Doc will get to me when he's done." The casualness of it stuns Yamamoto. No anger, no resentment, just acceptance, as if it's the most natural thing in the world to wait while the surgeon saves an enemy's life. Sullivan follows Yamamoto's gaze and nods. "Lieutenant Commander Harris, best thoracic man in the Pacific Fleet. Doesn't matter if you're wearing green or khaki. If you need his hands, you get 'em." He adjusts Yamamoto's IV drip. "You got lucky there, too. That infection should have killed you. We pumped you full of penicillin, new wonder drug. You're probably getting better medicine than you'd get in your own hospitals." This has to be propaganda, Yamamoto thinks. Some elaborate psychological operation. They're treating him well to extract information, to break his will. But what information could a lowly private possess? He knows nothing of strategic value, nothing beyond his platoon's defensive positions, positions that no longer exist. A commotion at the tent entrance breaks his thoughts. Stretcher bearers rush in with a fresh casualty, an American, gut shot, bleeding profusely. The surgeon, Commander Harris, is still elbow deep in the Japanese soldier's chest cavity. He doesn't even look up. "Triage!" he barks. A nurse appears, examines the new arrival with swift, clinical efficiency. "Perforated bowel, major hemorrhaging, possible liver involvement. Priority immediate. Table 2, prep for emergency laparotomy. Miller, you're up." Another surgeon materializes, already snapping on gloves. Within seconds, the wounded American is on the operating table and a different medical team swarms him. Harris continues his meticulous work on the enemy soldier as if nothing happened. Yamamoto's worldview cracks a little wider. "See, that's the thing about Doc Harris," Sullivan says quietly, checking Yamamoto's pupils with a penlight. He says once you're on his table, you're not Japanese or American. You're just a patient, just somebody's son who deserves a chance to go home. Over the next 6 hours, Yamamoto observes a system that defies everything he was taught about war. Wounded arrive in steady streams: Marines, Army infantry, Japanese prisoners. Each is assessed by triage protocol: immediate, delayed, or expectant. The immediates get treatment first, regardless of nationality. A Japanese corporal with a sucking chest wound is prioritized over an American with a broken arm. An American with severe burns leapfrogs a Japanese soldier with a flesh wound. It's purely medical, coldly logical, and somehow profoundly humane. Around noon, Sullivan brings Yamamoto a canteen of water and a meal. Canned peaches, hardtack biscuits, Spam. American rations. The irony isn't lost on Yamamoto. For months, Japanese propaganda claimed Americans were starving, desperate, weakened by decadence. Yet here's food more abundant than anything he's seen in the Imperial Army since 1942. "Eat up," Sullivan encourages. "You need calories to fight that infection." Yamamoto hesitates, then eats. The peaches taste like heaven, like life. That afternoon, an older Japanese prisoner is brought to the cot beside Yamamoto. Superior Private Hiroshi Nakamura, captured near Mount Tapochau. Nakamura is conscious, relatively uninjured except for dehydration and exhaustion. When the medical staff moves away, he leans toward Yamamoto and whispers in Japanese. "This is a trick, deception. They want us docile before the torture begins." Yamamoto wants to believe that. It would make the world make sense again. But he's watched for hours now, and he's seen no deception, only exhausted doctors and medics treating wounds with the same tired professionalism, whether the patient tries to thank them or spit at them. "I don't think so," Yamamoto whispers. "You're a fool. They're demons. Kichiku Bei. Remember what they did at—" "What did they do?" Yamamoto interrupts. "What did we actually see them do?" Nakamura falls silent, because the answer is nothing. Everything they know about American atrocities comes from propaganda officers, from rumors, from directives issued by men who never faced the enemy themselves. That evening, Sullivan returns to change Yamamoto's dressing. The wound looks better. The angry red has faded to pink. The swelling has reduced. Healing. Actual healing. "You're going to make it," Sullivan says with genuine satisfaction. "Couple weeks you'll be walking again. They'll transfer you to a POW camp on Hawaii. Could be worse places to set out the war." Yamamoto finds his voice for the first time. His English is broken, learned from a textbook in school, but adequate. "Why?" he asks. "Why save enemy?" Sullivan pauses, then sits on the edge of the cot. He looks young suddenly, barely older than Yamamoto himself. "You know what my old man does back in Brooklyn? He's a doctor. GP, nothing fancy. When I was a kid, I asked him why he treated Mr. Kowalski, this guy who was a real bastard, beat his wife, drunk all the time. You know what Pop said? He said, 'Jimmy, when someone's bleeding on my table, I don't see their sins, I see their suffering, and I took an oath to end suffering where I can.'" Sullivan stands, shouldering his medical bag. "I'm not a doctor, but I took the same oath. You didn't stop being human when you put on that uniform. Neither did I." He walks away to tend to another patient, leaving Yamamoto alone with a revelation that will reshape everything he thought he knew about honor, duty, and the nature of his enemy. Outside the tent, the battle for Saipan grinds on, but inside, a different kind of battle has just been won. June 23, 1944. POW holding area, Saipan beachhead. The cage is a perimeter of barbed wire staked into coral sand, 30 yards square, guarded by bored Marines who smoke cigarettes and trade baseball scores like they're watching livestock instead of captured enemy soldiers. Inside, 47 Japanese prisoners sit in the scorching sun, each grappling with a shame more painful than their wounds. Yamamoto's leg still aches, but he can walk now with a cane fashioned from bamboo, provided by the same Americans who saved his life. The cognitive dissonance is maddening. Superior Private Nakamura sits beside him, staring at nothing, his face a mask of misery. "My father was a kendo instructor, 3rd Dan. He taught me that surrender was the ultimate dishonor, that a samurai's death redeems all failures." He laughs bitterly. "I couldn't even do that right." Around them, similar conversations unfold in low voices. Lieutenant Sato, the highest-ranking prisoner, hasn't spoken in 3 days. He sits apart from the others, radiating silent condemnation. 2 corporals attempted suicide on the 2nd night, one with a hidden razor, one by refusing food. The guards discovered both attempts and intervened. Now both men are alive, force-fed if necessary, hating their captors for the mercy that denies them honorable death. But not everyone shares that hatred. Private Kenji Fujimoto, captured with a shattered femur, approaches Yamamoto hesitantly. At 19, Fujimoto looks even younger than his years, baby-faced, with hands better suited to holding a rice bowl than a rifle. "Yamamoto-san," he says quietly, using the respectful honorific, "is it true what they say, about the medic treating you first before their own wounded?" Word has spread through the cage, stories traded in whispers, each prisoner comparing experiences, trying to reconcile what they witnessed with what they were taught. Yamamoto nods slowly. "I saw it myself. An American soldier with a shoulder wound waited while they operated on a Japanese with a collapsed lung. The surgeon didn't hesitate." "Why?" Fujimoto's voice cracks. "Why would they do that?" "I asked the same question." Yamamoto fingers the dog tag around his neck, a metal identification tag the Americans gave him, stamped with a number. POW 2847, an identity even in captivity. They said something about an oath, about ending suffering. "It's propaganda," Lieutenant Sato says, for the first time in days, his voice hard. "Psychological warfare. They show mercy now, so we betray our comrades, reveal military secrets." But Yamamoto has been thinking about this for 8 days straight. "What secrets, Lieutenant? We're privates and corporals. We know nothing they can't learn from captured documents or observation, and they haven't interrogated anyone except to ask names and units." Sato's jaw tightens. "Then it's to break our spirit, to make us collaborators." Or, Yamamoto says carefully, "it's simply what they said it is, medical ethics." The words hang in the humid air like blasphemy. That afternoon, everything changes. A jeep arrives carrying a U.S. Navy chaplain and a Japanese-American interpreter. Staff Sergeant Daniel Inoue of the 442nd Regimental Combat Team, though he's been temporarily assigned to translation duties. Inoue is young, Hawaiian-born, wearing the same uniform as the men who captured them, but speaking flawless Japanese. The prisoners react with visible hostility. A traitor, a race betrayer serving the enemy. Inoue seems unsurprised by the cold reception. "I'm here to inform you of your rights under the Geneva Convention," Inoue announces in formal Japanese. "You will be treated humanely. You will receive medical care, adequate food and shelter. You will not be tortured or executed. You will be allowed to send word to your families through the International Red Cross that you are alive." "Lies," someone mutters. Inoue's expression hardens. "I'm going to tell you something, and you can believe it or not. My brother is serving in the 100th Infantry Battalion, all Japanese Americans, fighting in Italy right now. You know why? Because we have something to prove. That loyalty isn't about the color of your skin or where your grandparents were born. It's about the principles you defend." He pauses, letting that sink in. "The United States isn't perfect. We've got our own shame. My parents are in an internment camp in California right now, locked up just for being Japanese. But here's the difference. Americans can admit when they're wrong, can fight to change unjust laws, can treat even their enemies with the dignity that every human being deserves." Lieutenant Sato spits at Inoue's feet. Flowery words from a traitor's mouth. The Marine guards tense, hands moving toward weapons, but Inoue waves them off. He crouches in front of Sato, meeting his eyes. "Lieutenant, I've read the reports. You were pulled from a bunker after it took a direct hit from a flamethrower. You were unconscious, third-degree burns over 30% of your body. An American medic, Hospital Corpsman Wade from Tennessee, carried you out while the position was still taking fire. He got wounded doing it, took shrapnel in his arm." Inoue's voice is quiet but relentless. "That man saved your life at risk to his own. And you repay him by calling him a demon?" Inoue stands. "Your propaganda lied to you. The question is, are you brave enough to admit it?" That night, the prisoners can't sleep. The tropical heat is oppressive, but that's not what keeps them awake. It's the questions, the doubts, the slow, agonizing realization that everything they built their honor upon might be constructed on lies. Yamamoto lies on his back, staring at stars that look the same here as they did over his village in Yamaguchi Prefecture. He thinks about Sullivan, who saved his life and asked for nothing in return. About Commander Harris, who treated wounds without seeing flags. About Corpsman Wade, who carried Lieutenant Sato from fire. Beside him, Nakamura whispers, "My father taught me that honor meant dying for the emperor. But what if honor means something else? What if it means living with the courage to face the truth?" Across the compound, Private Fujimoto is asking similar questions, and in his isolated corner, even Lieutenant Sato stares sleeplessly at the darkness, wrestling with thoughts he dare not voice. The next morning, something unprecedented happens. A Marine corporal approaches the cage carrying a canvas bag. "Medical check," he announces. "Anyone needing wound care, line up." The prisoners exchange uncertain glances. Then Yamamoto stands, leaning on his bamboo cane. Then Fujimoto. Then, one by one, 15 others. They line up at the wire, and Navy corpsmen enter the compound, unarmed, vulnerable, to change dressings, distribute sulfa powder, check healing injuries. Sullivan is among them. He grins when he sees Yamamoto. "Look at you, up and walking. That's what I like to see." He examines the leg wound with professional satisfaction. "Healing clean. Another week you won't need the cane." "Yamamoto-san," he says haltingly. "Your friend, Wade, he is..." Okay? Sullivan's grin fades slightly. Touch and go for a while. They got most of the shrapnel out, but there's nerve damage. Might lose some function in his hand. He notices Yamamoto's expression. Hey, don't beat yourself up. Wade knew what he was doing. He'd do it again. Why? It's the question Yamamoto can't stop asking. I am an enemy. My people killed his friends. Why risk life for me? Sullivan finishes bandaging the wound before answering. You ever hear of the parable of the Good Samaritan? Jesus told this story about a guy who got robbed and beaten, left on the road to die. Religious folks walked right past him. But a Samaritan, someone from a group everybody hated back then, he stopped, bandaged his wounds, paid for his recovery. Wade's a Christian, reads his Bible every night. I think maybe he takes that story seriously. Love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. Crazy talk in a war, right? He walks away, leaving Yamamoto with yet another impossible idea to wrestle with. That afternoon, Lieutenant Sato approaches Yamamoto for the first time. His face is drawn, aged beyond his 30 years. Tell me everything, Sato says quietly. Everything you saw, everything they did. I need to understand. And Yamamoto does. He tells it all. The aid station, the triage, the surgery, the oath. When he finishes, Sato is silent for a long time. Finally, the lieutenant speaks. If we survive this war, Yamamoto, we must remember. We must tell this story so that others might learn what we learned too late. It's not quite an admission, not quite an acceptance, but it's a beginning.
August 12, 1944. USS Pinckney, transport ship, en route to Hawaii. The hold of the transport ship smells of diesel fuel, salt water, and 200 unwashed bodies. Yamamoto sits on a metal bench welded to the bulkhead, feeling the ship roll beneath him as it cuts through Pacific swells. Around him, Japanese prisoners, collected from Saipan, Tinian, and Guam, huddle in small groups, speaking in hushed voices or not at all. They're being shipped to permanent POW facilities on Oahu. Scuttlebutt among the guards suggests a camp near Honolulu, complete with barracks, medical facilities, and regular meals. To men who spent the last months of the war eating grass and tree bark, who watched friends die of starvation and disease, the idea seems like fantasy. They're fattening us for slaughter, mutters Sergeant Oda, a veteran of the Malaya campaign. He's older than most prisoners, 35, with the weathered face of a professional soldier. Making us comfortable before the executions begin. It's what we would do. But Yamamoto isn't so sure anymore. It's been 8 weeks since his capture, 8 weeks of careful observation. He's watched American guards treat prisoners with bored indifference rather than cruelty. He's seen Red Cross inspectors check conditions, take notes, file reports. He's witnessed 3 separate instances of prisoners receiving the same medical care as American servicemen, including emergency appendectomy surgery on Private Watanabe, performed by a Navy surgeon at 2 in the morning. Beside him, Nakamura is writing. The Americans provided pencils and paper, allowed prisoners to compose letters home, letters that will be reviewed by censors, but eventually delivered through the International Red Cross. Nakamura has written and rewritten his letter to his father 12 times, each version wrestling with what to say, how much truth to reveal. How do I tell him? Nakamura asks desperately. How do I explain that everything he taught me about honor and duty and the enemy, how do I say it was all wrong? Lieutenant Sato, seated nearby, looks up from his own letter. Over the past weeks, something has shifted in Sato. The rigid certainty has cracked, revealing a thoughtful, troubled man beneath. Perhaps you don't, Sato says quietly.
Perhaps you simply tell him you're alive, that you're being treated well. Let him draw his own conclusions. The ship's doctor, Lieutenant Commander Robert Chen, Chinese-American from San Francisco, makes his daily rounds through the hold. He's accompanied by a corpsman and Staff Sergeant Inoue, still serving as interpreter. Chen moves methodically, checking on the wounded, distributing vitamins to men showing signs of malnutrition, offering treatment with the same clinical detachment he'd show to any patients. When Chen reaches Yamamoto, he examines the leg wound with satisfaction. "Excellent healing. Full range of motion restored. You're one of our success stories, son." He makes a notation on his clipboard. "Once we reach Oahu, you'll be cleared for regular work details. Light duty to start. Gardening, kitchen assistance, that sort of thing. You'll be paid 80 cents per day in camp scrip, redeemable at the canteen." Yamamoto blinks. "Paid? For work?" "Geneva Convention, Article 27. Prisoners may be compelled to work, but must be compensated. No military labor, no dangerous conditions." He moves to the next patient. "Welcome to being a POW in American custody. Could be worse." "Could be worse" becomes a mantra among the prisoners. When the food is bland but adequate, could be worse. When the guards are gruff but not cruel, could be worse. When they're given clean clothes and access to showers, could be worse, could be worse, could be so much worse. On the third day of the voyage, something remarkable happens. A fight breaks out in the hold. Sergeant Oda attacking Private Yoshida with a makeshift shiv crafted from a bent spoon. The reason? Yoshida was overheard thanking an American guard for extra water rations. "Collaborator! Traitor to the Emperor!" Oda screams as he lunges. Marines swarm in within seconds, separating the two. Oda is subdued and dragged to the brig. Yoshida is bleeding from a shoulder wound, not deep, but requiring stitches. As corpsmen treat him, Oda's voice echoes from the passageway. "Death to those who betray Bushido! Death to those who—" The voice cuts off abruptly, not because Oda is harmed, but because the brig door closes. Later, Lieutenant Sato addresses the assembled prisoners, with Inoue translating for the guards' benefit. Sergeant Oda represents the old way of thinking, the belief that any acknowledgement of the enemy's humanity makes us traitors. But I have been thinking deeply these past weeks. He pauses, choosing words carefully. "We were told Americans were demons. We were told they would torture us. We were told they had no honor. Every single thing we were told was a lie." Murmurs ripple through the crowd. Agreement, disagreement, confusion. "This doesn't mean we betray our homeland. This doesn't mean we stop being Japanese. But perhaps it means we start seeing clearly. Start recognizing that honor isn't found in blind obedience to lies. Perhaps true honor is having the courage to acknowledge truth, even when it's painful." That night, Yamamoto dreams of home for the first time since his capture. Not nightmares of shame and dishonor, but actual memories. His mother's kitchen, the smell of miso soup, his younger sister's laughter. The dreams aren't tainted by guilt anymore. They're just memories, human memories. He wakes to find Nakamura has finally finished his letter. "What did you say?" Yamamoto asked. "The truth," Nakamura replied. "I told him I was captured, that I am alive and unharmed, that the Americans have treated me with unexpected kindness, that I've learned something important about the difference between what we're told and what is real." He folds the letter carefully. "I told him I hope to see him again someday, and that I have much to tell him." August 15, 1944, POW Camp 6, Honolulu, Oahu. The camp is nothing like Yamamoto expected. No torture chambers, no execution grounds. just rows of wooden barracks surrounded by chain-link fence topped with barbed wire, guard towers at each corner, manned by soldiers who look more bored than menacing. Beyond the fence, palm trees sway and tropical breathe. In the distance, the blue-green waters of the Pacific Ocean sparkle under brilliant sun. They're processed with bureaucratic efficiency, photographed, fingerprinted, issued camp uniforms, surplus army fatigues with PW stenciled on the back in white paint. Assigned to barracks, given orientation by the camp commander, Colonel Matthew Carson, a career officer who speaks to them through Inoue with firm but fair directness. This camp operates under strict adherence to the Geneva Convention. You will be treated humanely. You will receive adequate food, medical care, and shelter. In return, you will obey camp rules, perform assigned work details, and conduct yourselves with discipline. Attempts to escape will be punished with solitary confinement. Violence against guards or fellow prisoners will not be tolerated. Is this understood? Through Inoue, the prisoners respond affirmatively. The barracks are Spartan but clean. Bunks with thin mattresses, footlockers, a coal stove for the cooler months. Yamamoto is assigned to Barracks 7, along with Nakamura, Fujimoto, and 40 other enlisted men. Lieutenant Sato and other officers are housed separately, per Geneva Convention protocols regarding segregation of ranks. That first evening, sitting on his bunk in the fading light, Yamamoto realizes something profound. For the first time since joining the Imperial Army 3 years ago, he feels safe. Not victorious, not proud, not honorable in the way he was taught to understand honor, just safe. Across the barracks, Private Fujimoto is crying quietly, not from despair, but from relief so overwhelming it had nowhere else to go. Nakamura is sitting beside him, offering wordless comfort. Outside, a Marine guard walks the perimeter, rifle slung casually over his shoulder, whistling, "Don't fence me in." In the distance, a radio plays American jazz, Glenn Miller's orchestra, though Yamamoto doesn't know the artist. The music drifts through the evening air, strange and foreign, and somehow comforting. Yamamoto lies back on his bunk and closes his eyes. Tomorrow they'll begin work details.
Now navigate the complex social dynamics of camp life, the shame of survival, the slow process of rebuilding identity from the ruins of propaganda. But tonight, he's simply grateful to be alive. And for the first time since his capture, he doesn't feel ashamed of that gratitude.
December 7th, 1945. POW Camp 6, Honolulu, Oahu. 3 years to the day after Pearl Harbor, Takeshi Yamamoto stands in the Kemp vegetable garden, his hands deep in Hawaiian soil, planting seedlings that will feed both prisoners and guards alike. The irony of the date isn't lost on him. December 7th, a day that began this war, now just another day of routine labor in captivity. But for Yamamoto, it marks something else, the anniversary of his 19th birthday, which he spent aboard a transport ship heading to Saipan, burning with patriotic fever and absolute certainty about his enemy. He's 21 now. The war in Europe ended 7 months ago. The Pacific War concluded in August with 2 blinding flashes over Hiroshima and Nagasaki, events that sent shockwaves through the POW camp, triggering 3 suicide attempts and a week of stunned silence. Japan had surrendered unconditionally. The emperor himself had spoken on the radio, his voice transmitted even to this distant camp, urging his subjects to endure the unendurable. For many prisoners, that broadcast shattered the last pillars of their worldview. Emperor Hirohito, divine and infallible, admitting defeat, accepting occupation, calling for cooperation with the conquerors. Some prisoners still refuse to believe it's real, insisting it's an elaborate American deception, but most have reluctantly accepted the truth. The world they knew is gone. The question now is, What comes next? Yamamoto-san, you're planting those tomatoes too close together. Yamamoto looks up to see James Sullivan, no longer a Navy corpsman, but a civilian volunteer helping with the camp's agricultural program. Sullivan was discharged 3 months ago after accumulating enough points, but instead of returning to Brooklyn, he stayed in Hawaii, working part-time at the POW camp. When Yamamoto asked why, Sullivan just shrugged and said, "Figured you guys might need a friendly face during the transition." Too close? Yamamoto's English has improved dramatically over 16 months. He speaks with a heavy accent, but growing confidence. How much space? Sullivan kneels beside him, demonstrating the proper spacing. Give him room to grow. Crowded plants compete for nutrients, produce smaller fruit. Everything needs space to reach its potential. They work in companionable silence for a while, Japanese prisoners and American volunteers side by side in the garden. It's a scene that would have been unthinkable in 1943, yet here in late 1945, it's become routine. The camp has evolved into a detention facility, into something stranger, a liminal space where former enemies coexist while waiting for a future neither side fully understands. Repatriation has begun, but it's a slow process. Japan is devastated, occupied, struggling to feed its own population. The American military is prioritizing the return of sick and wounded prisoners first, then officers, then enlisted men by seniority. Yamamoto, young and healthy, is low on the list. He might be here for months yet. Strangely, he's not sure how he feels about that. "Yamamoto-san," Yamamoto says as they water the seedlings, "can I ask something? Personal question." "Sure, shoot." "When you saved my life on Saipan, did you think about Pearl Harbor, about Americans killed by Japanese? Did you hate me?" Sullivan considers this carefully. "Honest answer? In that moment, I didn't think about Pearl Harbor or politics or any of that. I saw a scared kid with a leg infection that was going to kill him. My training kicked in. Assess, stabilize, evacuate. That's the job." He pauses, wiping sweat from his forehead. "But later, yeah, I thought about it. Thought about my cousin Eddie, who died on the Arizona. Thought about what you guys did in China, in the Philippines. And you know what conclusion I came to? You were a kid who believed what his government told him, same as Eddie believed what our government told him. Both of you got sent to kill each other over decisions made by old men thousands of miles away. Eddie's dead. You're alive. If I can help make sure some mother in Japan gets her son back, maybe that balances the scales a little. Maybe that's how wars actually end, not with victory parades, but with people choosing to stop seeing each other as enemies." The words settle over Yamamoto like a benediction. Over the past months, he's had countless similar conversations with guards, with volunteers, with other prisoners wrestling with the same questions. Slowly, painfully, a new understanding has emerged. That afternoon, there's a camp assembly. Colonel Carson stands before 300 prisoners with important news. Inoue translates, though most prisoners understand English by now, to catch the gist. The repatriation schedule has been accelerated. The first large-scale transport will depart in 3 weeks. Approximately 200 of you will be aboard. I want to be clear about what you're returning to. Japan is under occupation. Food is scarce. Infrastructure is destroyed. You will face hardship. You may face hostility from those who view your survival as shameful. He pauses, letting Inouye's translation catch up. But you will also have an opportunity. You've spent over a year in this camp. You've learned English. You've learned about American agricultural techniques, mechanical skills, and administrative procedures. You've seen a different way of doing things. When you return to Japan, you'll be among the few Japanese civilians with direct, extended experience of American culture and values. That knowledge will be valuable during the reconstruction. Colonel Carson's expression softened slightly. I want you to know that despite the circumstances that brought you here, despite the war that made you prisoners, the staff of this camp has been impressed by your dignity, your discipline, and your willingness to adapt. You've shown that even enemies can find common ground.
I hope you'll carry that lesson home with you." That night, Barrack 7 buzzes with conversation about repatriation. Emotions are mixed: relief, anxiety, anticipation, dread. Private Fujimoto, who has become something of a camp artist, has been sketching portraits of prisoners to send home to their families. He's drawn dozens over the months, capturing faces that war has aged beyond their years. "What will you do, Nakamura?" asks Yamamoto, "when we return?" Yamamoto has been thinking about this for weeks. "Find my family first, make sure they're alive, help them rebuild if I can. After that, He trails off, uncertain. "I want to tell the truth about what happened here, about what we learned, but I don't know if anyone will listen. We're defeated soldiers, prisoners who surrendered. Many will see us as shameful examples, not teachers." "Then we must be patient," Lieutenant Sato says, joining the conversation. Over 16 months, Sato has transformed from a rigid military officer into a thoughtful philosopher of sorts. "We plant seeds, like in the garden. Perhaps we won't see the harvest, but future generations will benefit from what we learned. The truth has a way of surviving, even when buried."
December 28th, 1945. Honolulu Harbor. The transport ship USS General M.C. Meigs sits low in the water, ready to carry the first wave of repatriated prisoners back to Japan. Yamamoto stands in line with 200 others, each carrying a small duffel of personal possessions, clothes provided by the Red Cross, letters from home, small mementos from camp life. Sullivan is there to see them off, along with Commander Harris, who performed that first surgery that saved Yamamoto's life 17 months ago. Harris moves through the line, shaking hands with prisoners whose wounds he treated, wishing them well in halting Japanese he's picked up. When Harris reaches Yamamoto, he stops and smiles. "You're the infected leg from Saipan, right? June 44? "Yes, sir. You saved many lives. Thank you." Harris waves off the gratitude. "Just doing my job, but I'm glad it worked out. You take care of yourself, son. Japan's gonna need good men to rebuild." Sullivan gives Yamamoto a canvas bag. "Care package for the voyage. Chocolate bars, playing cards, a couple paperback books. And this." He pulls out a small leather notebook. "I kept a journal during the war. This is a spare. Thought maybe you might want to write down your story. What happened, what you learned, for your kids someday or your grandkids, so they know war isn't what the propaganda says it is." Yamamoto accepts the gift with both hands, bowing deeply in the Japanese fashion. "Surivan-san, I cannot repay kindness you showed. You saved life. Changed everything I understood about world." "Yeah, well, you changed some things for me, too. Made me remember that there's no such thing as a human being who doesn't deserve basic dignity, even when we're trying to kill each other." He extends his hand for a Western handshake. "Good luck, Takeshi. I hope you get the life you deserve." They shake, two young men who met as mortal enemies and parted as something close to friends. The gangplank beckons. Yamamoto boards with the others, finding a place at the rail as the ship prepares to depart. Nakamura stands beside him, and Fujimoto, and Lieutenant Sato, and dozens of others whose lives were irrevocably altered by 16 months in American captivity. As the ship pulls away from the dock, a strange thing happens. The prisoners begin to wave. And on the dock, the guards and medical staff and volunteers wave back. There are no cheers, no celebrations. The wounds are still too fresh, the losses too real. But there's acknowledgement, recognition of shared humanity discovered in the unlikeliest of circumstances. Yamamoto watches Oahu recede into the distance, its green mountains and white beaches fading into tropical haze. He thinks about the boy he was on Saipan,
terrified, indoctrinated, certain that death was preferable to capture. He thinks about everything that boy believed and how nearly every belief was shattered by the simple act of a medic choosing to save a life regardless of whose side that life fought for. He opens Sullivan's notebook and writes the first entry. June 15, 1944. This is the day I learned that my enemies were human. It is also the day I began to become human myself. Beside him, Nakamura asks, "What are you writing?" "The truth, so that someday someone might learn from it." The ship cuts through Pacific waters, carrying men home to an uncertain future. They go as prisoners transformed by unexpected mercy, carrying lessons learned in the unlikeliest of classrooms. They go as witnesses to the radical idea that even in war, humanity can persist, if someone is brave enough to choose compassion over hatred, healing over harm. Behind them, the war is over. Ahead, the hard work of peace begins. And in a garden on Oahu, tomato seedlings push through dark soil toward the sun, given room to grow by hands that once trembled with fever and fear, now steady with purpose and understanding. The harvest will come. In time, the harvest always comes.